Suzie So Blue is a Melbourne-based singer and songwriter who blends the essence of blues into the world of country with her tenor guitar style and soulful vocal. I'm going to start that again. Suzie So Blue is a Melbourne-based singer and songwriter who blends the essence of blues into the world of country with her tenor guitar style and soulful vocals. She started releasing singles last year and recently released two on the one day, Bend and Fall in Love. We're going to talk about those. Hello, Suzie.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Great to meet you on screen. And I'm going to start by taking you through your musical history. Did you always want to be a musical artist?
No, actually, I always wanted to play music, but I hadn't thought about being an artist per se. Yeah, I've been playing since I was 9 or 10.
Hmm.
We used to have like a family polka band, and we were and I was in a local community band. So up in Brisbane, almost every suburb has its own brass band. So I was in the Beenleigh brass band, and so my only aspiration was just to play cornet like my dad. So at 8, I thought that's what I want to do. And he was like, wait till you got your two front teeth. And I think they must have come in around 9 or 10.
So when you started out playing in the polka band, what instrument were you playing?
When the polka band came along, I was 12. And at that point, I was playing E flat horn.
Okay.
Yeah. So we had this funny thing where my dad was buying and selling instruments just to try them out, basically, because his mother was sending us these hymn kind of like books, not quite hymn books, but they look like what we'd have. Salvation Army hymn books are a particular size, but in Czech, those are for like their folkloric waltzes and polkas. And so we were practicing them as a family. So 3 cornets, my sister, my dad, and I. And then he's like, well, you're all playing the same parts. We need a bit more different sound. And so I took that opportunity to change instruments,
Right.
change to the E flat horn. And upon selling the trombone or whatever we had, we met this guy who had a German band at the Gabba. There's like this big German club in Brisbane that everyone goes to during Oktoberfest, which is right now, right opposite the cricket grounds. And he was like, come join my German band. And we're like, I'm in grade 7 or 6 or something. My dad's like, yes. We joined a German band as a family. And that just kind of kicked on for about 10 years. And we branched off with our own little Czech fraction because we would play these like Czech social club events once a month that were out in this kind of like property where you'd go on a Sunday and there'd be barbecues and people playing like soccer and the band would play and it was like a Czech library and we just provided the music and were given like a free lunch for that service. So it's a good exchange. I don't mind dumplings for playing. And we did that for years until pretty much I moved out of home.
Okay, so this is an incredibly rich and vibrant musical life that is not anywhere that I've found online about you. So I'm fascinated by all this. So, because when you said your dad had said not till you get your two front teeth, I thought he was actually trying to defer you from playing the cornet permanently, but no, he did actually let you once the two front teeth
Yeah.
in. Okay.
Here's the thing about the pressure of playing. It's best to wait till you have adult teeth to do that. So
Right.
yeah. And at the same time as being in the band, because I actually found that quite embarrassing. So my aspiration as a kid of being like my dad changed when I got to high school. I'm like, but at this point, he's like, we're in a band, we have commitments, so you can't quit. And so now we're in like the German band, a Czech band. We joined 2 other brass bands. And then we're in a concert band. We are just moonlighting and all these things. Who knew there was such a need for brass players? And I was like, this is too much. When I start high school, I'm going to play the flute because I can hide that in my backpack. I don't have to carry this big
Right.
instrument to school. And so I picked up the flute along the way. And it doesn't necessarily point to where I came to in music now, but the fact that I was playing the E flat horn, which is an offbeat part, it's all offbeats. It's very 1 2 but kind of reminds me of country.
Right.
And there's waltzes in country, and then yeah, so I kind of feel like a sentimentality came through that I hadn't really planned on. Yeah.
Well, and also just the fact you mentioned that there are brass bands in every suburb in Brisbane. I was like, wow, yeah. I wonder what the background is to that because that suggests that something was going on in Brisbane at a certain time that there were lots of brass
Well,
bands.
there's actually a lot even here in Melbourne, but I think they consolidate over the years. So they become just in the city council. So back then, actually, maybe there's one per city council, but Beenleigh's kind of in between suburb. But there'd be like a Gold Coast brass band, the Logan brass band,
Right.
Wynnum Manly brass band. But in Melbourne, there is actually a Preston brass band and a Coburg and a Moreland City Review band. There's
Right.
a few of them around, but we would play the Anzac days, the long tan day, the local old age home, Christmas carols, New Year's, any sort of carnival or fair that would go on, like any street parade. So the cane festival, the banana festival, the potato festival. So we would travel around the countryside because often there won't be just one brass band playing in a street parade. Like you'd go to Gatton and it'd be like 5 brass bands playing from different like cities and states representing.
Yeah.
Yeah, or we'd go to Murrumba, or I think where was the Banana Festival was a great one because right up near like where the Mardi Gras and the hippies are. It just felt so straight in our like yellow and brown uniform, marching down the street with boxes of free bananas on the side. And then we had this rogue band leader who led us down the wrong street, and the whole procession kept going behind us. And we're like, oh no, we've missed. We were leading the procession, but we didn't know where to go, and we took. Anyway, great stories. And this has all happened before I even hit grade 10. This was just the early years.
Yeah. But obviously quite formative years because, you're playing to a crowd. And of course, yes, if you're doing an Anzac Day march, you do need to have multiple brass bands because there are several different units that march and all that kind of stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm also fascinated that it was the Czech community, the German community. There were different communities that you were clearly getting involved with, which, also I think as a musician and as a performing artist is instructive because you learn about communities and how they're functioning and what they need. But it just sounds like you were kind of working full time when you weren't in school.
Yeah. My dad says yes to things and then it's kind of you figure it out later, which has served me well as well. So yeah. And also that idea of playing to a crowd, because I'm not the most confident person. I actually can be quite shy, but I've never had stage fright because the idea is that once you're on. Something has to happen, even if that means, walking down the wrong street with 30 people following you. Just roll with it.
Yeah. And of course your dad's committed you. So once you're on, you're late.
Yeah. Yeah.
So along with, the flute that you could put into your backpack, I imagine once you hit your teen years as well, polka music was kind of like, oh God, no, like that's really not it.
Yeah. But I kept playing it until I graduated high school. The flute, really, I let everything sit for a few years. And then I got a graduate traineeship in Canberra, and I was at a jam. I used to do this sport called capoeira. It's a Brazilian martial art. And anyway, people were jamming. They were all playing guitars, and they were like, "Oh, do you play an instrument?" I'm like, "Play a flute," but in high school. They're like, "Oh, we have some sheet music. Can you read it?" I'm like, "Well, I can." And next thing you know, I'm in a bossa nova band.
Oh my God. With the flute, or did you pick up brass again?
With the flute.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so it was nice. I actually consider bossa nova very cool. By comparison to polka, I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever played in my life. I was so chuffed. And it was through the Brazilian music that I actually got onto stringed instruments at all.
Right, okay.
And I got in this cavaquinho, which is a 4-stringed open G tuning, which is similar to a banjo in tuning, except it's it actually sounds a lot like a mandolin, but it's got, because it has steel strings, it's quite high pitched. But yeah, it's just very simple, 4 strings, very tiny. It sits in a samba kind of and choro and bossa nova context. But I was trying to play reggae on it and everything but, like Pink Floyd on it, and everyone's like, you're kind of not using that thing the right way. And then I made this great friend at work. I was a public servant at this point, just about to quit really. And I met this guy Conrad Lenz, who's from Canberra. He's also a great musician, got this very like gravelly voice, great kind of rock folk singer. Do you want to join my band? And I said, doing what? He's like, all of it.
So, I was about to say, because you could do all of it by that stage.
So the first gig, I had a flute, I had the euphonium. So at this point, I had my euphonium. I had the cavaquinho, and I had like a shaker. And it was like this variety show. Like he's doing his thing, and I'm sitting on the side, shy, completely not knowing what I'm doing, because this is now a really new genre for me. Like folk was a whole other thing I'd never considered. No sheet music. I'm actually trying to tap into like hearing music. But it kind of set me on the path I'm on now. One, because he trusted me to even make any noise with him, and he's an amazing musician. And some of the songs we now cover are from people who are in that band. So there's been a few great musicians from that band, like Randall Blair, who was the Wedded Bliss, who put out a great country record about 10 years ago. Now he's in Lonely Fates. And then Tom Woodward, who's just also put out a great record. And these guys, and also Michelangelo and the Tin Star, they used to do a cover of Conrad's song. So it was quite this great like Canberra, like folk rock royalty for me, and they trusted me to shake an egg even, let alone play the flute. Yeah, so I did that for a few years, 2 years or so.
Quietly, you were probably the best credentialed musician in that band, but
No, and in the meantime, I kept trying to upgrade. So I was getting closer to having a guitar than having this tiny little thing. And I went through this weird series of having a ukulele and being in like the local ukulele community group in Canberra, which was great because I picked up tunes that I never knew before, like Midnight Special, and would sing Jolene and all sorts of stuff. And all of these little subtle influences got me more closer to what I sound like now, that
right.
had I just had a leap from where I was. But that's fair. I've always listened to Tracy Chapman and been a really big fan of music, Johnny Cash, and that sort of thing, I guess, but hadn't really thought about playing it. Because in my mind, I wanted to be Bob Marley. Like none of these paths led to Bob Marley.
Is that because you were mainly listening to Bob Marley or mainly loved Bob Marley when you were
I
growing
just
up?
loved him. Yeah, I don't know. For me, his songwriting was it. He'd been quite prolific, and it was real like meaningful music, but that made you move. But now I investigate blues. It does this. It obviously hits some similar spots.
Yeah. I'm interested to find out because you mentioned, you can read music, and then you were talking about then, not reading music in that band. You didn't have the sheet music. So I have a theory that people who look, because I learned to read music young, I can't play by ear at all. And I have found
Yeah,
other people when I'm speaking to them, if they learned to read music young, it's quite hard to play by ear. So when
very
you're
hard.
doing that, yeah, right. That's, yeah.
Oh no, I was cheating. I wasn't playing by ear. I was memorizing sequences.
Okay.
So I'd run through all the notes on the flute, 'cause you can do that quite quietly, like chromatically, go through every single note of the scale. So mentally, I've got like a sheet music in my mind and go, which ones didn't
Okay.
work? And so still to this day, I couldn't say what key we were in or what chords we were. I just know it doesn't sound right and what does sound right.
Right.
And I should work on that. You know, like for example, this is one of these tracks that we are going to discuss. Kat Mia plays on it, and she's got this great. She plays with Cass Savage, and she plays with quite a few other musicians like Craig Woodward. And I was like, how do you do that though? Like, how do you just hear it? She's I would put on records when I was younger and play along to them. Just train my ear by playing along. And I was like, I never thought to do that actually. Something I hope I could still do, but
Yeah. I don't
yeah,
know that you can. I think because music is a language, like as in when you're looking at it on the page, it is like reading a foreign language, I think. And so the part of your brain that actually looks at that and thinks, well, that's the language, it maybe shuts off the part that can actually
yes,
hear it and pick something up.
yeah.
I think that's a separate language. That's just my theory. It's like playing by ear is almost separate.
Absolutely. And there are players who only play by ear who actually feel they're at a loss because they can't read. They find reading slow, like it's not as fast as they can. And I'm the opposite. I can sight read quite well. I can follow along. And
Mhm.
so yeah, it's two opposite problems. It can kind of suck.
But ultimately, you're playing a lot of instruments by reading music, and you mentioned that it was the bossa nova band that led you towards string instruments, and so you now play tenor guitar. So when you first played that string instrument, did you think, oh yes, this is actually the family of instruments that's most right for me, or was it just over time you're like, this is actually more portable, I can do more than I can with flute because I can sing at the same time? So was it a
It
more
was
dramatic decision?
it was more like I'd go to parties and I love jamming. Like my favorite things to sit around a campfire and jam. And we did a lot of that in Canberra with the Bossa Nova crew and then generally with the other guys as well. Because everyone in Canberra doesn't really have a lot of family there. A lot of them are inputs from elsewhere. So you socialize with your friends a lot. And people are so shy to kickstart a sing along. And you can't sing along if you're playing flute. So I'd be waiting at these jams for someone to start to sing. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to learn to play a string instrument so I can start to sing along.
Right.
So that was my motivation. And also I didn't at that point sing very well. And I also had some, negative like thought comments from my dad basically saying, you should stick to brass because it's easy to tune. You're either on or you're off, So he kind of dissuaded me from string instruments and singing altogether. And at that point, I think maybe now I'm 30, I'm just like, who cares? I don't even care if I sound bad. I just want to hear people singing. And some of these really good musicians won't start till someone else starts. It's almost like you have to be the person who goes, okay, I don't mind being bad, and someone good joins in and you can like let them take over.
Yeah. I do think your dad might have had ulterior motives, though, telling you to not sing. He wanted to keep you in the lane he
In the
developed.
band.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
He had bad experiences with strings and guitar back in Czech as well, but to do with strict teachers and always being late and all sorts of other excuses. So I think he thought, no, don't go down that path. Just pick something that's really, he's a very logical, practical kind of guy. So I do appreciate what I learned from him. But
Mhm.
yeah, he doesn't see all the possibilities and the craziness and yeah.
So, given how much you were jamming in Canberra, the amount of experience you've had performing, do you feel like performance is something that you can put on and put off, or are you basically just constantly? Because it seems to me like you've just been surrounded by music for so many years that you must almost be in constant creative flow with it.
Um, Performance though feels very different from the creative side of creating the music for me though. Like when we are performing, I'm so focused on interacting with the audience in an authentic way that I can't go into my head about what other possibilities there are. And so
Mhm,
some ways it can also be very an isolating experience. Like it's just that moment. But if
mhm.
I'm at home jamming and listening to other music, and that's when the ideas do come. So, and I am actually inside. I still feel like a very shy person. So when I get up there, I've tried to memorize everything so that I don't have to look at the music and I can just kind of be in my mind and connect. So, but it doesn't, I don't know if I feel like it doesn't come naturally, but then I guess to some other people that might seem like a more natural state than they feel too.
Right,
So,
right. So once you started singing, did you get the bug? Did you feel like, oh yeah, this is now another instrument I can add to the brace of
yeah,
instruments I play?
I was like, this is great. And also, we tried in that bossa nova band to sing in Portuguese. Like, we're doing all those bossa nova classics like Girl from Ipanema, but I learnt them in Portuguese. So I
Right.
don't even know them in English now. I know them all in Portuguese, but I have the worst pronunciation. But to most untrained ears who don't speak Portuguese, as I don't, it's like, well, you're singing Portuguese. So you get away with a bit more too. I'm just going to repeat that line because it rhymes. And yeah, second a Brazilian person's around. I'm like, no, yeah, you sing. But I kind of struggled along. I don't think I was very good with pitch and being shy. I kind of tried to sing very gently. And I
Mhm,
had really nice encouragement from these guys in Canberra. And it was like they were really happy to celebrate the natural sound that your voice has, including those nuances where you're warbly or pitchy, because
mhm.
it gives this music a real sense. And actually, now that it's been years since we've really played together, I appreciate that the confidence they gave me so much more. Like one said, don't get lessons, you'll ruin what's special about it. I have gotten lessons since though. But my friend said, don't let them tune you into being some kind of singer, like a particular kind of singer. And all those guys, when I listen to their records, it is I don't know, something about Renato, like Paul Kelly, like you wouldn't say he has like a choral voice, but it's
Mhm,
such his voice. Imagine if someone trained him out of his nuance
mhm.
or, his tone, and he sounds like him. So I feel like I really appreciate that. And
Yeah.
I think back in the folk days, like you listen to some of these early blues guys, they're almost speaking the lyrics,
Mhm.
and but I had to work on my voice a bit because I think I ended up post COVID getting some vocal cysts, and
Yeah.
then I really was emotional. I was like, oh no, I finally got the confidence to perform, and now I've ruined the very thing that I'm like now willing to do. And so I had to get some actual therapy to improve the technique to use
Mhm.
my voice properly. I was also teaching a lot and going to karaoke and carrying on because you come out of lockdown in Melbourne, it's like woo, we're gonna
Yeah.
celebrate. Like I think one of the third lockdowns, I also DJ and I was scheduled to DJ and they had announced a lockdown that evening at like 8 o'clock. But it was like a sudden announcement and I was supposed to
Right.
play at 8 DJing and they said, will you come at 5? And I was like, all right. I remember bringing a bag of records and my daughter and going to this place. And it was like feeling like we were in like, I don't know when it's like, what's those times in the 1920s when they couldn't drink? Like
Or prohibition. Yeah.
yeah, it was like that.
You're in a
People were playing.
speakeasy.
It's like a speaker. People were playing dominoes. People were dancing. People were hanging outside. It was so much fun. But it was like we all were trying to cram in fun right before a curfew. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I love those days for the worst reasons because of COVID, but they had such a great vibe. But yeah, I
Yeah.
really overdid my voice. I really wore it out in those few months coming out of the lockdowns. That
Mhm.
I had to really get back on top of it with a professional, not just with
Yeah.
yeah, my own YouTube search.
But it would have been hard to have months of nothing, right? No performance, nothing,
Yeah,
hardly even speaking to other people because you couldn't see other people. And then obviously you want to do as much as you can. And so yeah, I don't
yes.
think there would have been an easy way to balance that without overtaxing yourself.
And musicians, we were saying yes to everything and anything because we hadn't worked. I was saying yes to every teaching job, every DJ shift. Music didn't come back straight away. A lot of bars that only had music were getting DJs on now because they could have a DJ with a mask on, but it's hard, with the singers, you can't. And I'd only just really started that point doing open mics, but I threw myself into it. I picked an open mic and I went every week, and I was being very diligent. And I really thank COVID, but also blame it for the voice things. I think I talk a lot, as you can tell, I'm talking, and I think I wore my voice out by not having kept up that amount of talking.
Right.
So yeah, I think it was coming from nothing to everything all at once.
Just quietly, when I'm interviewing people, I love it when they talk, because that's what because I don't want to talk myself. That's not what it's for. It's for you to talk. So when you
Thank you.
what sort of music do you like to play?
Reggae. Reggae, funk, and soul. I actually have a decent amount of blues and country, but one of my first ever shifts in Melbourne, I was in this really cool underground bar where it was just like an after work drinks thing, and I tried to slip some blues, some BB King in, Robert Johnson, and someone goes, "That's really nice, except you got to keep the vibe." I'm like, "Oh, it's a vibe." They were like, "Yeah, but you're being packed through upstairs where all the restaurant and it's really busy, so kind of keep the BPM. They're really strict, but keep the BPM above 100 or whatever it is." And I was like, "Oh, yep, point taken." People don't want to hear blues in these kind of clubs. So I'm not to say I would never do it, but I haven't come across that kind of gig yet.
Yeah. So when did you start writing songs?
Back in camp, well, actually, no, even before that, like really early 2000s.
Okay.
I used to go to this is another story. I feel like I'm the most random person, but I used to go to these hip hop jams, not to sing, but to watch. This is when I lived in Brisbane. They had these nights called Strawberry Jam. It was an all-female night, and I was like, yeah, celebrating female musicians, and they'd have like flute players and bass players, all femmes, and then an MC. And I was like, whoa, and this is about the time of the Eminem thing, phenomenon. I was like, and I wrote poetry. I'm quite a pensive, introspective, cynical, and existential person. So I'd already written a few things. I was always a drawer and drawing things, and I'd sometimes have these visual art stories that were quite moody. And I'd reflect on things. They didn't really rhyme, but they were just observations. And I thought maybe I could write rhymes. Like these women are doing it. Never the idea to get up on stage. It never crossed my mind to be a performer. Still, this is while still doing the Czech stuff. Hadn't thought about being a performer. And I really felt like I was going to be a really good punter. I'd go to gigs. I was out constantly in Brisbane. I really loved going to live music. And wrote more after seeing these jams and kept writing. But I was writing them like raps now. Like now I'm writing rhyming things. And I had this book and I kept writing and writing and writing. And then slowly, I started turning them. I'd hear another song play and kind of try and sing them over it. I tried to rap them at first, it was horrible. And then I'd try and sing it. And I was like, oh, it actually works. And then, but the rhythm's not quite right. And I really wanted it to be reggae. I thought if I could be a reggae artist, it'd be so never worked. And I don't know what I was listening to. Maybe it was Tracy Chapman or something like that. I think it was Lucinda Williams. Something came up and I was like, oh, my song fits perfectly in this. I don't maybe it was Amy Winehouse and Valerie or something like that. I thought, oh, maybe I've just been thinking about music so pigeonholed. Like you write a rhyme, it's a rap. You write music, it's this. And I put the lyrics to it, tried a few chords, and was like, oh, okay. And then with maybe because of the musical background, I was like, oh, I quite like this chord progression. Everyone has an A minor to, D minor song. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to have a light reprieve and put a major thingy in there, put like a C instead of an A. And then next thing I had a song, I was like, I have a song. And it was like 10 years ago, right at that time I was in Canberra and had started just hanging out with those guys, with Conrad and Tom. And I think I did an open mic once and then didn't do another one for 3 or 4 years.
All right. Was that because you startled yourself so much doing the first one? You're like, I can't go back.
I say yes to a lot of things and I'm like, I was not ready. Like, you don't just write a song and then the next day do it. But then I go to open mics sometimes still. I hear someone say, I wrote the song an hour ago. And they look like they know it off by heart. I was like, I wrote a song 10 years ago and I have to work so hard to really keep it. And also, there's so much good music, especially from DJing. I hear so much good music. I had to make sure that what I released or wrote or put out in the world, even at an open mic, felt worthy enough to be said. Because so many people have already conveyed these feelings of heartbreak so well. How could I compete? Not that it's a competition, but in my mind, I was quite analytical. Like, how could I possibly recapture the feeling of, I don't know, someone stealing your man? Because, she's already done it. Dolly's already done that,
Yeah.
So it has to be a different story or a different way, and that I feel I haven't heard before for me to warrant doing it at all.
Mhm.
And I was quite critical and harsh on myself, and I'm not like that anymore, actually.
But it does tell me why you hadn't released any music until last year, because given your
Yeah,
extensive musical background, and yeah, the first single was last year, you've released three this year. So was it just that it was you were just making sure it was the right song to release and you felt comfortable that it was at a certain place to release?
yeah, yeah. I think in some ways, I think it happens. I want to say it happens with women, but I go to jazz, like a jazz jam weekly, fortnightly now, and more just for the socialization, because it's a regular jam. It's very close to my house. I'm still like 100% into the jazz, but I prefer blues still. But I go and I really observe. There'll be like, 2% of women, and of those 2%, we will find every excuse amongst us to not go up until maybe the last half an hour of a 6 hour jam or a
Right.
5 hour jam. And most of the people there are musicians and perform. Like we as performing musicians, they'll go, no, you go first. Yeah, no, it's your turn, sis. And like, oh, have you played yet? And whereas the guys are waiting with the instruments ready to go, it's like, had two songs, my go.
Yeah.
The only time I've been that forthright is when I came once with my daughter. I was like, oh, I have to go because it's bedtime. So if I don't get my song now, I'm out. And I felt so rude. I even messaged one of them after going, I'm so sorry cutting on you, but I really had like to go because my daughter's bedtime's at 7:30. I was like, why am I apologizing
Yeah.
at a
Yeah.
jam for taking up a spot when I only come fortnightly and I'm one of like 5 women who'll be there and there'll be about 20 to 30 guys.
Yeah.
And they try their best to incorporate us, but it is really hard when you've been socialized in a way to own your space. And we're socialized in a way to ask for a space or to wait for one to be actually more not asked, to be waiting to given a spot.
Yeah.
So I bring friends and I'll be like, they're not going to give you up. I'm gonna ask for a spot for you, and I'm going to keep trying to make that spot happen.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and I've noticed that maybe within myself, I was waiting for someone to say I should do it, like waiting for someone to go, I'm going to record you, or I'm going to do this. And in some ways, that's exactly what happens. So
Right.
yeah, it wasn't like I went, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'd won a mentorship through the Bois, which
Okay.
is a local multicultural music like organization that really, which I surprisingly putting me forward since I sing in English and doing country music, mostly focus on multicultural music, or at least people from the diaspora doing music. I'd say 90% of their music is non-English singing, and they're trying to give a platform for music that's not very mainstream.
Mhm.
But I guess in the sense that maybe being from a multicultural background but doing country, they thought, well, this is an interesting intersection. So give give the South African Czech woman a chance, even if she wants to sing in English, you know.
Well, yeah, but also I would think just your background alone, God, you're so well qualified to make music. So once you got to the point of recording and releasing a song, how did it feel once you actually had some music out in the world?
Oh, it's so good. I play the song every day still.
Right.
Like it's especially that first one, Built in the Sun. It just when we were in the studio, and the studio was so much fun. I was worried at first. I was quite tentative, like, oh, what do you think? What do you think? And then I realized this is my song. Like I'm gonna have to really love every bit of it. So I'd be like, no, 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 let's try this. No, no, do this. And I knew it was adding time and adding cost. But to Oscar's credit, Oscar Poncel was the producer, and he plays all the other instruments in it as well. He tried out all those things and created a really beautiful track that went even further into that vibe that I wanted. I really wanted this Western kind of desert, like it was a landscape song. In my mind, it was a real landscape song.
Mm.
And he really played really well. So I was like, yeah, it kind of set. We ended up doing the other songs all together because it really set this pattern for working, and we worked quite a lot after that. It was almost like weekly we would meet. It was just a 2 hour session, but weekly for months. And we're like, let's try another song. Let's just start another one and bring another musician in. And the confidence grew, and then also the crazy ideas grew, and then the price grew. And I'm like, oh god. But the first one was sponsored, so that first track was mostly covered for by the mentorship and these like sessions. So if it hadn't been for them, within a space of 2 months, I'd went from performing solo to having a three-piece band with my
Right.
producer playing the double bass. Like he was like, let's go, let's play. And so he went to Canberra with me. We played a few gigs. That's how I kickstarted the whole gig thing. So it was a
Okay.
year and a half ago. We've played about 45 gigs since.
Yes, you do play quite a few gigs. I saw on your social media. I was like, you you're doing things regularly. There seem to be some Melbourne venues that you do play fairly regularly, all of which gives you a chance, of course, to test out songs on audiences before you record.
Yeah.
So the latest songs, Bend and Fall in Love, had you tested them out on a few audiences before recording?
Yes, we were playing them from the very beginning, from like from that year and a half ago or 2 years ago. But I hadn't had the idea to put Kat or Craig on them until really late in the piece. We'd recorded the song, most of it, by December last year. Kat came on in January, and then Craig again in March. And they were kind of like, the song was done. It was actually fully mixed. We were about to send it to the master, and I said, it's good, but I said, I'm not feeling like the solo's nice, but I want to really feel something in this like solo. And then for some reason, I don't know what I was listening to. Again, I listen to a lot of folk music, and sometimes I hear something like, I want it to sound like that. Like I want it to be sparse like that, or busy like that, or to have that role. And I thought, I think I need fiddle. And I don't know many fiddle people. I only know one fiddle person. I only know Kat. So through a friend of ours, she was her old roommate. And so I messaged her and I was like, Kat, would you? And knowing how amazing she is. And that was like, I can't believe I'm going to ask her. But I was prepared to have the no. I was like, I had sent a message. It's absolutely okay if it's a no. I'm just putting it out there. Or I said, in fact, if you know any fiddle players who are just emerging and maybe they'll like, I can't remember how to word it. She said, I'm in the States, but I'm back next week. I'll be in on Tuesday. And I was like, oh, she's like, to send me the song. I sent it to her. She rocks up. She had done in half an hour and 5 takes. Like she just played and then played and then played. And it was every single one was amazing. And so we're like, which one? I was like, let's just keep all of them. And now it sounds like an ensemble of fiddles we're playing. But it's Kat on every single take. Every take was perfect. I'm like, wow, she's amazing. We met for a coffee. She'd already figured out the part, played boom, boom, boom. And then we had a long chat. I was like, I don't know what just happened. It was like, and we had to then scrap what was there. So we scrapped, there was a really nice guitar part, which we might release as another take one day. Nice take, and a really nice electric guitar, but I said, it's too busy now. Scrap that. I had doubled up on I had 2 tenor guitars, and I had to take one of the tenor guitars out. So it was done. And then it was mixed again. And then I brought Craig Woodward on for another song. Craig Woodward plays old-timey music, and he has for years. He plays Cajun music. He has a really regular jam. He's been doing it at Merry Creek Tavern for 20 years. Like, he's the guy for fiddle, accordion, and banjo. And he's amazing on banjo. And I brought him in for another song. He had mistakenly listened to the song that Kat was on and thought he was on that one. So prepared for that song. Right. I was like, no, I was just saying it as an example of what the finished product could sound like, to show that, kind of saying, I will be professional. It won't just be something. It'll be as good as this. He goes, I've even tuned to prepare for that song. And I was like, no. So he detunes all the things into this other song, does an amazing take there. So good. That's an unreleased track that's still going to come. Right. And then I said, well, since you're here and you have prepared something, can I hear it? Yeah. And so we record it, and it's perfect. And I go to the producer, I'm like, I'm so sorry, and I know I'm going to have to pay this again. But can you now remix it now with Craig in it? With the part he had planned for. And he's like, so I didn't read the email properly. I'm like, that's all right. It's all very rush. And yeah, so the one that you hear is, Craig's take, Kat's takes, and then they're all months apart, all separate sessions.
Yeah, right.
But I think those two play a lot together. And so I think Craig playing to the track with Kat, they really know how to play to each other. So I think he's played to her really well.
Yeah. So in deciding to release these 2 singles on the same day, was that you thought, well, they're done and there's no need to stagger them, get them out right?
There's all these strategies, like waterfall strategy, blah, blah. I'm like, I'm sick of sitting on these tracks. Like, since it started in December and it was now October, I'm like, put it out, put them all out. I was actually going to release 3, and I have a third one ready to go. But I tried to do one of them with a different distributor, and it didn't work out. So I just scrapped it. So I'm going to do that maybe in December or something. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting that you tried a different distributor, because these days, yes, there are all sorts of options for how you're going to release music.
Well, there's been like some, I don't know, I feel like there's been a lot of media around trying to pick a local distributor, or one that's going to really support the artist more than just put the music out. And so I know that there's a few local ones that when there is issues, then you actually have a person to talk to. In the end, I just released with CD Baby, and they're great because it's a very self-managed thing. But if you need help, there's no one answering the phone. It's an email that waits for weeks. But this third one, I thought I'd try I think it was Mahogany Sounds or something. But it's kind of like a submission process. Like they will listen to and see if it's going to fit where they're going with their sounds. And they also run like a YouTube channel promoting artists really well. I thought I'll give it a crack. It was very close to the deadline anyway, and they just wrote back and said not quite the direction we're going in. I was like, no worries, but I'd missed the timing now with the other two.
Got it.
But it's
Yeah.
good. It gives me a spare one.
That's right. So can you please tell us the stories behind those singles? So the story behind Bend and the story behind Fall in Love.
Bend. I think I wrote. I went to Japan on a holiday. I think I'd already written most of that song, but I was on holiday in Japan, and we were hanging out with this Japanese family, friends of ours, and I'd said, "Oh, the trees here are so beautiful. Like they're these manicured shapes, like pom poms, all the way down." And she just said, "Everything here has been like manipulated. Like there's nothing natural." It was like she's a Japanese native, so I think she had also lived in Australia for about 20 years. Was like had gone back and was like seeing the flip side, seeing it from another side. She's like, everything's been sculpted or modified. We're in Tokyo, so it's not like that everywhere. And I was like, oh, it's interesting because I've always thought about like bonsais as being these great, like, I don't know, meditative pursuits. But then when you really think about it, it's controlling how a tree grows and its shape. And I remember someone telling me that the shape is supposed to replicate what happens in nature, but you do it by hand. And so you have these little miniature trees that look like they've been pushed by the wind, which is why that song was called Bend, because like they'll bend slowly, but yeah, you're controlling nature, which will always spring back. So you have to really shape it. So I said, I felt like in that moment, like I'm like this tree, but you know, if you really push me, I will bend, but it's going to be this really slow process. So you kind of, yeah, it's like I'm changeable, or people can change, but it's not an easy process. It's like being weathered down like a rock face in the ocean or something, but like a tree in the wind. Yeah. And I guess it's quite a cynical song. A lot of my songs seem quite cynical, I guess, reflecting on maybe being dissatisfied with having picked some of my professional careers as opposed to artistic pursuit. And that's when I really started writing. I was working a public service job and jamming at night, and realizing that I would sacrifice being awake the next morning to be up all night. That became more important to me. And so, yeah, and then observing that every time you make that choice as an artist, you give up something else. And sometimes it is a particular relationship or lifestyle choice. Yeah, and I see my friends doing that who are musicians too, and you can really weather people's relationships like a tree. So I kind of feel like we are like, yeah, these trees and winds. A lot of musicians can be, and artists in general, just pushing against the grain enough to live, but enough to satisfy their own need to express themselves. Yeah.
It's yeah, I think it is an eternal push and pull, right? Because it's not like that desire to pursue that path goes away. So you can sublimate it, you can try to do the you know, conventional career or whatever it is, but then you're going to be sacrificing sleep the next morning to stay awake all night.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you compromise in your career because people are like, oh, you're not invested in it. And then part of you's like, well, I'm not. And then you start kicking back and it doesn't help.
And so Fall in Love is a different story.
Yes, I co-wrote that one. It was fully written and I was performing it, but it had something a bit irksome about it. I was like, I think I always had these other words in there that seemed a bit too hokey, even though it's my most like honky song. But I was talking about it with a friend at the time. We both had a dress shop together. We would sit and chin wag about our relationships all day long while sewing. I'd be like, and then this happened, and they said this, and okay. And I said, but doesn't it make you feel like this? And I played her the song. She's like, yeah, except what about when this happens? And I wrote that down. It was really like this gas bag session about relationships of the past. And then kind of summarize that feeling about how you would feel or how that person made you feel. And she had some of these choice lines like that. The one I think I say, I know we're not going to be, and I know it because you told me. And she's like, oh, it's so hard. Like they told me it wasn't going to work, but still, I'm like, I know. And so we kind of I crafted a song from that conversation, keeping the original chorus that I had. Yeah.
Right. So you just mentioned a dress shop and sewing. So obviously you can sew as well.
Yeah, I couldn't find a better backdrop. That's my sewing machine's right there.
I only just realized that. So is the dress shop still going?
No, there was in Canberra, and I
Yeah.
had another one here as well, but they both wrapped up. Now I just do like stockists and online, and it's one of my many things I do. A lot of things.
So I'm going to go back to my statement about constant creative flow. I do
Yeah.
think that you live in it by the sound of it. You're creating clothes, you're creating music. So when you sleep, do you dream of creativity?
Oh yeah. I don't really sleep. I feel like I sleep in these weird patches because the
Right.
ideas come and I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. Oh, I want to hear what that. Like, so I'll be like, I save lots of songs or I'll visit certain pages and I'll be at 2 a.m. going, oh yeah, and then oh, I don't listen to this. Oh, that documentary that person talked about. Like even today while I was sewing part of this costume for my daughter for Halloween, I was listening to that Louis Bluey documentary. He's like a mandolin player from back in the day. There's a documentary set in the 70s. And so he does this old timey music, but people keep asking him to do blues. He's like, no, I do this thing. And I was listening to that going, oh, I don't even sit still while doing one pursuit. I'm still thinking about the other one. And I'm getting all these ideas, wanting to note down some of these old songs, going, oh, it'd be great to do a version of that. And he was telling great stories about also cultural clashes where he'd play with like, Italian banjo players and he'd learned Italian just by hanging around in these communities back in the 50s.
Right.
Well, in 30s, really. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I could talk to you for another hour because you have so many interesting things going on, but I should wrap it up. So people
Sorry.
can don't apologize. It's fascinating. And also I crack down on women saying sorry for things
Thank you.
whenever women say, and because it often is women saying sorry, and I'll say, "Did you kick me in the head?" And they'll say, "No." I'm like, "Right. So why are you apologizing to me?"
And then
So
they say sorry again.
that's right. That's right. So don't say sorry.
Yes.
People can find you in around Melbourne in particular. It looks like you play quite regularly. You have another
Mhm.
song obviously recorded, ready to go. I would imagine you are planning to record and release some more when you have the opportunity to do so.
Yes. Yeah. We have like three. So one definitely done. We released by the end of the year, and then two more that are part recorded. So working on.
Fantastic. Well, I shall look forward to hearing those. If I am in Melbourne at the time you are playing, I am definitely coming
Yes,
to watch you
please.
play.
You'll
And
be our guest.
Suzie So Blue, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.